Buckle up, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into the future, specifically how we'll be getting around and living in cities by 2050.
And let me tell you, the predictions are fascinating. We're looking at a world that's wrestling with some familiar problems like traffic, pollution, and those ever-increasing energy demands.
But also, our source material has uncovered some seriously creative solutions. Think self-driving trucks, cities designed for people, and not cars.
And get this, fuel made from sunlight.
It's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. So, to get us started, we're diving into a documentary transcript that lays out predictions and potential solutions for creating a more sustainable future. And that all starts with a pretty staggering statistic. 2 billion cars on the planet by 2050.
Yeah, that's double what we have now.
Wow. It's exciting to think about all those new drivers hitting the road, but where are we going to put them all?
Right, and think about the fuel consumption and the emissions.
Yeah, unless we start thinking differently about, well, everything. So, the source talks about Brazil and their success with sugarcane ethanol. They've actually managed to reduce their reliance on petroleum.
And it's way more efficient than using corn.
I'm curious, what makes sugarcane so special?
Well, it's all about energy balance. Sugarcane ethanol gives you about 7 times the energy that you have to put in to produce it.
7 times. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a real game changer when you compare it to corn-based ethanol, which barely breaks even.
I see. So it's not as easy as just planting sugarcane everywhere.
You got it. Biofuels always come with some limitations, even the efficient ones. Land use is a biggie, and then you have to factor in the potential for things like deforestation.
Yeah, and then what about using land for food crops instead?
Exactly. It's a really complex issue.
The source also mentions second-generation biofuels, and these are made from things like switchgrass. Could that be an answer?
Potentially, yeah. Second-generation biofuels are really promising. They utilize non-food sources, so think agricultural waste or fast-growing grasses like you mentioned, switchgrass.
Fuel from weeds, that's amazing. I love it. Okay, but it feels like the source is just getting started with all the possibilities for fuel alternatives. Engineered use that could produce anti-malarial drugs and biofuels. Is that even possible?
It is, yeah, and it's all thanks to something called synthetic biology. Scientists are figuring out how to program microbes so they create valuable substances.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
In this case, they've modified yeast to produce artemisinin, which is an anti-malarial drug that also happens to be a hydrocarbon, much like diesel fuel.
So we're talking about like hacking microbes to create fuel. That's next level stuff. But how do we take this from a test tube to actually fueling cars?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? Scaling up, we need more research to optimize the processes involved and, of course, funding to make them commercially viable.
So there's still a long way to go before we see this at the pump. Speaking of things that seem straight out of science fiction, the source also talks about artificial photosynthesis, creating fuel directly from sunlight and water, just like plants.
It's pretty fascinating. Artificial photosynthesis is all about mimicking nature, but doing it with even greater efficiency.
That's amazing. But I can't even imagine what that technology would look like.
Well, the source had an interesting analogy. Imagine rolling out solar fuel bubble wrap in the desert.
Solar bubble wrap. Okay, I can get behind that. It would be amazing if something so simple could power our world. But even if we could figure out fuel, we still have the age-old problem of traffic.
Oh, tell me about it. It's such a drain on time and resources. You know, the average American spends 38 hours a year stuck in traffic.
A full work week. So what can we do about it? The source mentioned intelligent maps, and that sounds promising.
Right. So companies like Nokia are working on these 3D digital maps that give you real-time traffic data.
Okay.
And they optimize routes for the best efficiency. It's like Google Maps on steroids.
Sign me up for that. No more driving around in circles looking for parking either, right?
Well, that's where autonomous vehicles come in. This isn't just about self-driving cars. This is about rethinking transportation altogether.
Okay, so are we talking about a future where our cars are driving themselves, talking to each other, and just navigating traffic seamlessly?
Exactly. They can even work together in platoons, so imagine a line of cars driving very closely together to reduce drag and improve fuel efficiency.
Like a high-tech conga line of cars.
Yeah.
I kind of love it. But what about cities? Can we design them to rely less on cars in the first place?
Now that's where Masdar comes in. It's a city built in the Arabian desert, and get this, it's designed to be carbon neutral and completely pedestrian friendly. It's basically a living lab for urban innovation.
Wow. A city in the desert with no cars? That's bold. I'm dying to know how they do it.
Okay, well, first of all, no cars are allowed on the surface. All transportation is underground.
Wait, so the streets are just for people walking around.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Right. And they've used traditional Arabic architecture to provide shade, which helps reduce the need for air conditioning.
It sounds like a futuristic oasis. But how do they power this place?
Well, they rely heavily on solar energy. There's a massive field of solar panels generating a significant amount of electricity.
Amazing. So are they completely off the grid?
Not quite. They still rely on the grid, which is powered by natural gas, at night.
Okay, so not perfect yet, but still a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But can this kind of city model work in other places? Can other cities adopt these ideas?
That's the big question, isn't it? Mazor is a great experiment, but its real value will be in the lessons we learn, things we can apply in different situations. Not every city can just ban cars or build these massive underground transportation systems, but there are elements that we can adapt.
So it's all about figuring out what works where.
Right. It's about taking the principles behind these innovations and making them work in different settings.
So like a giant puzzle, figuring out how all these pieces fit together.
Ex-
It really makes you think about how we could adapt these ideas in other cities around the world. Speaking of adapting, the source mentioned something called solar beam downs, which, I don't know, that sounds like something straight out of Star Wars.
It does sound futuristic, doesn't it? Imagine a field of mirrors reflecting sunlight onto a central tower.
Okay, so like a giant magnifying glass for the sun. What happens to all that concentrated sunlight?
Well, it generates intense heat, which can create steam and power turbines. So it's a way to harness solar energy, but on a really massive scale. And it's ideal for places that get a lot of sunshine.
It's amazing to think about all the ways we can use the sun for energy. But even with all these innovations like fuel and city design, we have to remember people love their cars. Will they really be willing to give up control to autonomous vehicles?
That's a really great point, and it highlights how important the transition period will be. It's not like we're all going to wake up one morning and our cars are driving themselves. It's going to be a gradual shift.
I bet there will be people who are hesitant, especially when it comes to safety.
Oh, absolutely, and we need to take those concerns seriously. Building trust in autonomous vehicles will require a lot of testing and transparency. We need to show people how the technology works, and there have to be clear regulations so everyone feels safe.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about data privacy? I mean, all these intelligent systems, they rely on a ton of data. How do we protect that?
You're right, that's critical. As cities become more interconnected and data-driven, we need really strong protections in place to prevent misuse. It's a bit of a balancing act, embracing innovation, but keeping our privacy safe.
A balance we have to get right. Okay, but let's zoom out for a minute. What are the big picture implications of all these changes? How could they impact our lives beyond transportation?
Well, if you think about it, all these innovations could change not only how we get around, but how we work, how we live, and how we connect with everything around us.
So it's not just about getting from point A to point B, but what we do with all the time and freedom we might gain.
Right. Imagine all those hours we spend commuting now. We could have more time for our families, for hobbies, or just for relaxing.
I could definitely get used to that. And if our cities are designed to be more pedestrian-friendly with more green spaces, cleaner air, that would really change our quality of life.
It's about moving away from a world that prioritizes cars to one that prioritizes people.
That's definitely a future I want to be a part of. Okay, but this all sounds pretty far off.
Right.
What can we do right now? What can we do as individuals to live more sustainably?
That's where our everyday choices make a difference. We can be more mindful about how we get around. Can you walk, ride your bike, or take public transportation instead of driving?
Okay, makes sense.
Even those small shifts can make a big difference, and we can make our homes more energy efficient. Maybe choose appliances that save energy, use less water.
Being aware of our impact and making conscious choices.
Exactly. And don't forget about supporting policies that encourage sustainable transportation and urban planning.
Right. Voting with our wallets and with our votes. It sounds like we can all do a lot, both individually and as a society. But were there any other fuel alternatives in the source that we haven't touched on?
There was one that really caught my eye, algae biofuel. Basically, we could be powering our cars with pond scum.
Wait, seriously? Algae can be used to make fuel?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Certain types of algae produce an oil that can be turned into biofuel. And what's really interesting is that algae doesn't need farmland to grow. It can be grown almost anywhere.
So no need to use land that could be growing food. That's pretty great. But how does algae biofuel compare to the other options? Is it as efficient?
Surprisingly, it is. Algae grows incredibly fast, which means we can produce a lot more fuel per acre.
It's amazing that something so simple could be such a key to a more sustainable future. But I'm guessing it comes with challenges, just like anything new.
Of course, scaling up production and bringing down costs, those are always going to be the hurdles to overcome.
It always seems to come down to that. But at least we have all these brilliant people working on finding solutions.
That's the good news. And don't forget, it's not all about fuel. The way we build cars is changing too, so think lighter materials like carbon fiber. That can really help with fuel efficiency.
It's like putting cars on a diet. Less weight, less fuel.
Exactly. Lightweight engines, transmissions, even the interior, it all adds up.
Those materials are probably pretty expensive though, right?
Well, they can be, but as we produce more, the prices will likely come down. And the money you save on fuel, not to mention the reduced emissions, it really makes up for those initial costs.
I guess sometimes you have to spend money to save money. And of course, to help the planet. Speaking of new ways to power cars, the source talks about something called electric roads. That sounds pretty futuristic.
It does, right. Electric roads can actually charge cars wirelessly as they're driving. No need for charging stations.
Wait a minute, hold on. We're talking about roads that can charge a car while it's driving? How is that even possible?
There are a couple different ways to do it. One uses something called inductive charging. So coils embedded in the road create a magnetic field, and that transfers energy to a receiver in the car.
So it's like a giant charging pad, but for your car.
Exactly. There's also another system that uses overhead wires to power the cars, kind of like how trolleybuses work.
So a mix of wireless and the traditional electric grid. I can't even imagine how much it would cost to put this technology in all of our roads.
It would be a massive investment, for sure. But the benefits are huge. You could have electric vehicles with unlimited range.
No more range anxiety. That would be a huge selling point for electric cars. But what about the environmental impact of building and maintaining these roads?
That's a really good question. But don't forget, electric vehicles are already way cleaner than those that run on gas. And we could use renewable energy to power the electric roads, which would lower their carbon footprint even more.
So it's kind of a chain reaction, right? Electric roads lead to more electric cars, which lead to cleaner air for all of us.
I'm starting to see the appeal.
It's definitely an exciting possibility. Of course, there are still challenges. Building new infrastructure like this is never easy.
I can imagine. But the possibilities are amazing.
They are. And don't forget, the technology is only part of the story. The real question is, how do we adapt to these innovations? How do we integrate them into our lives and our cities? It's all about balance, progress, and sustainability working together.
Exactly. We've covered so much in this deep dive. Maybe it's time for a break to let it all sink in.
All right, we're back. And, after this deep dive, it's so clear that we're on the verge of a transportation revolution.
We really are. And as we've been discussing, it's not just about the technology itself. It's how we incorporate all of these new innovations into our lives and our cities.
It all comes back to people. All these amazing advancements. It's all about creating a better future for all of us.
Exactly. We need to build cities that are sustainable and efficient, of course, but also cities that are livable and fun.
Cities where people come first, not cars. And we have green spaces instead of just concrete everywhere.
Yeah.
And clean air. Those are goals worth fighting for.
Absolutely. And it's not about waiting for technology to save the day. It's about taking action. Every choice we make, how we get to work, what we buy, it all makes a difference.
So we're not just passengers along for the ride. We're all part of the solution.
Exactly. And sustainability isn't some kind of burden. It's a huge opportunity.
Right? An opportunity to create a world that's cleaner, healthier, more equitable for everyone. That's a future I want to be a part of.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What role do you see yourself playing in all of this? What can you do today to help shape the future of our cities and how we get around?
That's a great question, something we should all be thinking about. The future is in our hands. It's up to all of us to create the kind of world we want to live in. Thanks for joining us for this incredible journey. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, we all have a role to play in shaping the future.